Hey everyone, it's Saoirse, and today we're going to talk about a book that I have heard so much about for the past few years, and I really felt like I was missing out, so I finally picked it up. It's called My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This was published by Ottessa Moshfegh in 2018, and so many of my friends have read this, and I've got people asking me to talk about it, so I finally picked it up, and I'll just say I was already in a pretty bad state of mind when I picked it up. This is not a pick-me-up. It's not going to make you feel better, so don't expect that from it. If you know me, you know that I love really depressing books, but I just wasn't quite prepared for how incredibly dark this one is. Let's just read the back and then get into it. The shocking and strangely tender story of a young woman's efforts to duck the ills of the world with the help of one of the worst psychiatrists in the annals of literature. Our narrator should be happy, shouldn't she? She's young, thin, pretty, a recent Columbia graduate, works an easy job at a hip art gallery, lives in an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, paid for like the rest of her needs by her inheritance. But there is a hole in her heart, and it isn't just the loss of her parents or the way her Wall Street boyfriend treats her, or her sadomasochistic relationship with her best friend Reva. It's the year 2000 in a city aglitter with wealth and possibility. What could be so terribly wrong? So, to start off, let's talk about how she is really good at showing and not telling us the narrator's problem, and the narrator, first of all, doesn't have a name. We can see very clearly that she's depressed, and she rarely, I don't even know if she ever uses that word, but we don't need her to because it is so clear through the actions that she's taking that she is dealing with extreme depression, and her way of coping with it is to become heavily medicated with sleeping aids so that she can, hopefully, she thinks, sleep and sleep and sleep until she experiences a sort of rebirth. So there's going to be some spoilers in this video, but not a whole lot happens in this book, and you know I also love books like that where it's not so much plot driven. It's more about a concept. Sometimes it's about the style, sometimes about the character. For this one, I think it was mostly concept for me. Just the idea of sleeping your life away in the hopes of waking up to a better life. I think that was a really interesting concept. But like I said, if you're in a really bad, dark place right now, I would say it's probably not smart to pick this book up. Just listen to yourself, protect yourself, do what's right for you in this moment. So, what the heck does that say? Oh, that I related in a very scary way to this character because having lived with clinical depression for most of my life, I was diagnosed when I was 16. I understand this desire to want to just sleep and not actually live or feel. You become kind of addicted to sleep and the way that it allows you to escape. So I related a lot to her in that regard, just not to the sleeping meds part because I've never actually taken any medication to go to sleep. I can sleep at the drop of a hat. No trouble at all. That's a whole other story. I'm very tired. Okay, and then I did think about how this felt very much like it could be interpreted as like a modern day bell jar. But this narrator, to me, is way harder to sympathize with. She's very, very, very unlikable, and I think that's on purpose, but it does make it difficult. I know that you don't have to like the characters in a story in order for that story to have merit. This was my issue with Game of Thrones, and I've said it a million times. I just didn't like anybody, and so it was hard to root for anyone. It's very hard to like this narrator, but you don't have to like her. You're really just learning about her and learning something from her. But she's very cruel with her best friend and with people in general. She just has extremely cruel thoughts about them, and she uses them and is not nice to them. And I don't know if that gives, like, there are some people in this world who don't deal with depression. I always find that shocking. But they might read this and think, like, oh, depressed people are just nasty, mean people. But depression doesn't automatically make you mean and uncaring. So I don't want that to be, like, the takeaway from this book. It manifests in different ways, but I can see how for some people, when they have completely given up caring about their own life, they become a bit more callous toward everything else and everyone else around them. That's not true in my case. I just kind of like wither away into a little creature, and don't have any interest in anything, including like using people for my benefit. I don't do that. But yeah, I can see how the characterization makes sense with her. So let's read some of the quotes in this book and chat about them. She says, plus I had investments. My dead father's financial advisor kept track of all that and sent me quarterly statements that I never read. I had plenty of money in my savings account too, enough to live on for a few years as long as I didn't do anything spectacular. On top of all this, I had a high credit limit on my Visa card. I wasn't worried about money. So we get the setup in the very beginning because you're questioning, how does this person decide to take a year off and just sleep? How are they going to financially do that? And it's because she has this inheritance and both of her parents are dead. And I picked this quote out because it's a great way of showing that money does not buy happiness. It can make a lot of things easier. It makes it easier for her to do what she's doing. But at the end of the day, you can be so deeply clinically depressed and have a lot of money. And having all of this unstructured free time, that often leads to a decline in your mental health. And I think this is something it's something I see a lot in like comments about celebrities who are dealing with mental illness. There are so many callous comments about, but you're rich. Oh, what do you have to be sad about? It's always, but you're rich. Oh, you're rich, so who cares? And that just drives me nuts, and it hurts my heart so much because it's like, have we lost our humanity? Have we lost the understanding that anybody can be depressed at any time for any reason or for no reason? And it does not matter what they have in their bank account. It's a mental illness. So, like, not having any sympathy or empathy toward people just because they have more money than you, that's really icky. And I just thought that was interesting to show that here's a character who you would look at from the outside and say she has it all, and she is so deeply depressed that she wants to sleep her life away. So you can't look at somebody and ever know what they're going through. Things were happening in New York City. They always are. But none of it affected me. This was the beauty of sleep. Reality detached itself and appeared in my mind as casually as a movie or a dream. It was easy to ignore things that didn't concern me. Subway workers went on strike. A hurricane came and went. It didn't matter. Extraterrestrials could have invaded. Locusts could have swarmed. And I would have noted it, but I wouldn't have worried. When I needed more pills, I ventured out to the Rite Aid 3 blocks away. That was always a painful passage. Walking up First Avenue, everything made me cringe. I was like a baby being born. The air hurt, the light hurt, the details of the world seemed garish and hostile. I relied on alcohol only on the days of these excursions. A shot of vodka before I went out and walked past all the little bistros and cafes and shops I'd frequented when I was out there, pretending to live a life. Otherwise, I tried to limit myself to a 1-block radius around my apartment. I thought this was a great passage to show what it feels like to be completely mentally checked out of your own life. It does hurt. Like, it feels physically and emotionally painful to go out into the world and be surrounded by all these things happening, and you get overstimulated so very quickly when you're in this state of mind. When I'm like this, I feel so fragile, and like I'm just made of glass, and I could shatter at a word from another person, even if that person is just like asking me if I can grab them a menu on the counter somewhere. Like, it can be anything. Anyway, I was both relieved and irritated when Reva showed up, the way you'd feel if someone interrupted you in the middle of suicide. Not that what I was doing was suicide. In fact, it was the opposite of suicide. My hibernation was self-preservational. I thought that it was going to save my life. So it makes you wonder, what does she really think and what does she really hope? Is she actually hoping that this is going to save her life, or is she hoping the opposite, that she's going to do this so successfully that she doesn't have to live anymore? And I think when she's in that state of mind, I think she doesn't really care either way. So she has this horrible toxic relationship with this guy, Trevor. Oh, I hate him so much. And through this relationship, we can see that she has a ton of insecurities. And again, this is a great way where we're being shown and not told. We can see clearly she's very insecure because she's holding on to this guy who is just awful to her and useless, and she could have somebody better, but she doesn't think she can because of these insecurities. There's this horrible part about him. I hated seeing that come on in him. One time he said he was afraid of fucking me too passionately because he didn't want to break my heart. So he fucked me efficiently, selfishly, and when he was done, he'd get dressed and check his pager, comb his hair, kiss my forehead, and leave. The way she talked about him, I was like, oops, I have way too much experience with guys like this. Afraid to be too passionate with you, afraid to, like, have any feelings. It's so scary. And then, like, we talked about her having so much money that it's hard for people to pity her. There's also the fact that she's beautiful. She looks like a model. So I'll read this paragraph here, and that really gives us a good idea. Since adolescence, I'd vacillated between wanting to look like the spoiled wasp I was and the bum that I felt I was and should have been if I'd had any courage. I'd shopped at Bergdorf's and Barney's and high-end vintage boutiques in the East Village. The result was an amazing wardrobe, my main professional asset as a new college graduate. I easily landed the job as a gallery girl at Ducat, one of a dozen fine art galleries on West 21st Street. I had no big plan to become a curator, no great scheme to work my way up a ladder. I was just trying to pass the time. I thought that if I did normal things, held down a job, for example, I could starve off the part of me that hated everything. If I had been a man, I may have turned to a life of crime. But I looked like an off-duty model. It was too easy to let things come easy and go nowhere. Trevor was right about my Achilles heel. Being pretty only kept me trapped in a world that valued looks above all else. So there we go. Something that, we don't always consider when we're looking at people who are just gorgeous, like unattainably gorgeous, and we feel jealous. We see that and we think like life must be so easy for them. And actually, when you look a certain way, whether you think you look good or not, people will interpret that you look good. They will project that onto you, and they'll treat you differently. And one of the ways they treat you is that that's all you have to offer the world. And that you must remain in this circle of, models and fashion and beauty and vapidness because clearly you're too pretty to think about anything deeper. So again, that was a great way of showing us that she feels very stuck because of the way that the world sees her. Oh, sleep. Nothing else could ever bring me such pleasure, such freedom, the power to feel and move and think and imagine, safe from the miseries of my waking consciousness. I was not a narcoleptic. I never fell asleep when I didn't want to. I was more of a somniac, a somnophile. I'd always loved sleeping. It was one thing my mother and I had enjoyed doing together when I was a child. She was not the type to sit and watch me draw or read me books or play games or go for walks in the park or bake brownies. We got along best when we were asleep. Again, I just felt that scary because I relate. I love sleeping so much. It is so hard for me to sit down and not think this would be a great time for a nap. I mean, people who have office jobs, I can't imagine because I sit down and that's it. It's over. I want to put my head down on the desk. I do a lot of my writing and whatever work I'm doing on the computer, I do it kind of lounging, not in like a chair, but like a, a different situation, a couch, my bed, because I have really bad back pain, so I can't really sit in a chair for very long. So it's really dangerous for me because I just want to go to sleep. And I know at some points in my life that is absolutely depression related, and other times, I don't know, maybe I'm tired, maybe I'm not sleeping well at night as much as I think I am, because I might be lying down from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., but that doesn't mean I'm like actually getting quality sleep. So I feel like her desperation in this book coming out so strongly, the way she's not getting the sleep that she feels she really needs and wants. And that comes through. Okay, so here we have what I think is like the thesis statement of the book, if you will. Soon I was hitting the pills hard and sleeping all day and all night with 2 or 3 hour breaks in between. This was good, I thought. I was finally doing something that really mattered. Sleep felt productive. Something was getting sorted out. I knew in my heart, this was perhaps the only thing my heart knew back then, that when I'd slept enough, I'd be okay. I'd be renewed, reborn. I would be a whole new person. Every one of my cells regenerated enough times that the old cells were just distant, foggy memories. My past life would be but a dream, and I could start over without regrets, bolstered by the bliss and serenity that I would have accumulated in my year of rest and relaxation. That's the moment where you're like, she said the book title. But yeah, there we have the point. Why is she doing all of this? Because, as she tells us, and we also know narrators are not always reliable, she thinks that she's going to become a new person, that this will fix her depression. And part of me wants to say it's a bit of a dangerous thing to put that idea out there. Obviously, art, you can do whatever you want with it, and people don't have to read this book. But I just hope some people don't read that and think that they should try the same thing. I really hope nobody has read this and thought I should just medicate like crazy and take a bunch of dangerous combinations of pills and try and sleep for a year. I really, really hope that nobody in a fragile state of mind tries that. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. It makes me nervous. So she loses both of her parents, and she holds on to their house for a long time. She says, I wanted to hold on to the house the way you'd hold on to a love letter. It was proof that I had not always been completely alone in this world. But I think I was also holding on to the loss, to the emptiness of the house itself, as though to affirm that it was better to be alone than to be stuck with people who were supposed to love you, yet couldn't. And I just thought how she's doing exactly that to Riva. How, you're supposed to love your best friend, but she so clearly hates her. And it's just sad the way you can see so many cycles being played out in this book, like such as with her mother. Her mother took her own life, and now she's pretty much doing that to herself. Her mother didn't give her the love that she needed, and now she's doing that to Riva. Okay, so is this more of a death or a rebirth? She says, sleeping, waking, it all collided into one gray, monotonous plane ride through the clouds. I didn't talk to myself in my head. There wasn't much to say. This was how I knew the sleep was having an effect. I was growing less and less attached to life. If I kept going, I thought, I'd disappear completely, then reappear in some new form. This was my hope. This was the dream. Again, so we're going to keep kind of asking ourselves, is she hoping for death, or is she actually hoping for a rebirth? In her mind, is it any different? And she always seems to want a magic fix for everything, which I totally get. You really hope that if you just sleep for this long, it will fix it. And maybe that's why I do my depression sleeping sometimes. I think this has got to be better than being awake, and maybe somehow things will get sorted out in there. There goes a note card. I suppose a part of me wished that when I put my key in the door, it would magically open into a different apartment, a different life, a place so bright with joy and excitement that I'd be temporarily blinded when I first saw it. And I thought that was just a great image, a great way to say that you hope that there is this magic fix, that just one day you'll open the door to your apartment and your life will be totally different. You won't even recognize it. I liked this bit about her using the trash chute. She says, I took the garbage out into the hallway and threw it down the trash chute. Having a trash chute was one of my favorite things about my building. It made me feel important, like I was participating in the world. My trash mixed with the trash of others. The things I touched things other people had touched. I was contributing. I was connecting. Now, this is a very interesting passage to me because she says, I felt important, and it is important. It actually is important that she feels that way, that she feels like she's contributing and connecting. And it doesn't matter that it is something as innocuous as using a trash chute. It doesn't matter where we source our feeling of connection. It just matters that we feel it because it is so important. You know, at the end of the day, we are animals who are communal and we need other people for the most part. And it's interesting that the one place where she talks about feeling that is through garbage. You know, it makes me think of something having reached the end of its usefulness, what we throw away in the trash. She feels she's reached the end of hers, and in a lot of ways is treating her mental health and her physical health like absolute garbage throughout the book. And if you know me and my fixations, I'm very, very interested in garbage and incinerators and landfills and, you know, what we do with the things we throw out. So any mention of garbage, I'm gonna latch onto that. So we talked about her kind of regressing into the state of emulating her dead mother. So she says, when talking about her mother, she thought she was sophisticated. She liked fine clothes, good liquor, but she knew nothing about art. She didn't read anything but romance novels. There were no freshly cut flowers around the house. She mostly watched TV and smoked in bed all day, as far as I could tell. That was her culture. And it's like, look at what the narrator's doing. Spending all day in bed and watching, like, easy-to-watch movies. So she's got the TV on all day. She's sleeping as much as she can. She's very much acting like her mother, which is very sad, knowing what we know about how her mother treated her. That she lost her parents so young, so early, and she never really got the proper love from them. So she's emulating the people who were supposed to have given her that love and that feeling of safety as a sort of like a coping mechanism. Sort of her security blanket is acting like this woman who was supposed to be her caretaker but wasn't, while she is trying to care for herself by having this year of rest and relaxation. And obviously it is not the proper or recommended way to care for yourself. So she has this letter that her mother left before she took her life. She says, occasionally over the years when I'd felt abandoned and scared and heard a voice in my mind say, I want my mommy, I took the note out and read it as a reminder of what she'd actually been like and how little she cared about me. It helped. Rejection, I have found, can be the only antidote to delusion. Great line. I was like, yep, absolutely. In any situation, family, friends, and relationships, we can be so delusional about what we mean to this other person, about how great it would be if they felt the same way about us as we feel about them. And only a face-to-face, really vehement, horrible rejection can snap us out of those delusions sometimes. So here's another part where we see she maybe doesn't care about this being a rebirth and it could just be a death and it's all the same to her. She's coming back to the city with Riva after Riva's mother's funeral. Maybe we'd die in a car accident, I thought. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window and looked out at the dark water of the East River. It wouldn't be that bad to die, I thought. So we don't know, is she just thinking this way because she's just been at a funeral all day? And like away from her bed and her pills and she's really having withdrawals? Or has she really not cared all along? What we do know is that her plan of rest and relaxation is not working the way that she had hoped it would work. She's getting more desperate. So she she keeps having these blackouts, and she finds from Polaroid pictures that she's been out partying in a way that she would never normally do. Everyone pushing toward the ecstasy of the dream of tomorrow, where they'd have more fun, feel more beautiful, be surrounded by more interesting people. And I liked this part as showing like the toxicity of New York City, and also the toxicity of this mindset that everything good is always coming next. What we're doing right now can't be good, it can't be worth it. It's always like a waiting room for what is out there. And I think, you know, she treats people this way, like she doesn't appreciate Riva in the present. And then she's treated this way by Trevor, who is always thinking like, which woman out there is the best, because this is just right now, but I'm looking for the best. Yeah, such an awful, awful mindset to have, and so many people have it. Here's how she uses Riva. She was just as good as a VCR, I thought. The cadence of her speech was as familiar and as predictable as the audio from any movie I'd watched 100 times. That's why I'd held on to her this long. I thought as I lay there, not listening. Since I'd known her, the drone of what-ifs, the seemingly endless descriptions of her delusional romantic projections had become a kind of lullaby. Riva was a magnet for my angst. She sucked it right out of me. I was a Zen Buddhist monk when she was around. I was above fear, above desire, above worldly concerns in general. I could live in the now in her company. I had no past or present, no thoughts. I was too evolved for all her jibber-jabber, and too cool. Riva could get angry, impassioned, depressed, ecstatic. I wouldn't. I refused to. I would feel nothing, be a blank slate. So yeah, they are just absolutely awful together. But there's moments where we see them kind of be good for each other, but are they good for each other in a way that's like really unhealthy? Or is this kind of their only option right now and they should stick together? I don't know. There's a lot to dig into with that relationship that I just don't have the headspace for right now, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Holding on to, okay, how many of my parents' hairs and eyelashes and skin cells and fingernail clippings had survived between the floorboards since the professor moved in? If I sold the house, the new owners might cover the hardwood with linoleum or tear it out. They might paint the walls bright colors, build a deck in the back, and seed the lawn with wildflowers. The place could look like the hippie house next door by spring, I thought. My parents would have hated that. So she keeps holding on to this house, and it's this symbol of her parents, of her childhood, of a past life, and it's all that she feels she has, even though it wasn't good for her at all. She's holding on to it because in her mind she thinks, what else do I have? She sees her life as a failure. Okay, so this part reminded me directly of the bell jar. She's trying to sleep. Where the heck do I want to start? Oh, I was going to sleep now, I hoped. I tried to surrender, but I would not sleep. My body refused. My heart shuddered. My breath caught. Maybe now is the moment, I thought. I could drop dead right now. Or now. Now. But my heart kept up its dull bang-bang thudding against my chest like Riva banging on my door. I gasped. I breathed. I'm here, I thought. I'm awake. I thought I heard something, a scratching sound at the door, then an echo. Then an echo of that echo. I sat up. A rush of cold air hit my neck. Shh, the air said. It was the sound of blood rushing to my brain. My vision cleared. I went back to the sofa. So that felt extremely reminiscent of the part in the bell jar where she says, I listened to the old brag of my heart. I am. Which could be coincidental, but, you know. We love a callback to classic literature. Okay. This is her rebirth moment, so we're getting toward the very end here. The gray mist obscured my vision. Had I crossed the seal? Was the world crumbling? Calm, calm, I told myself. I could feel gravity sucking me deeper, time accelerating, the darkness around me, widening until I was somewhere else. somewhere with no horizon, an area of space that awed me in its foreverness, and I felt calm for just a moment. Then I recognized that I was floating without a tether. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I was afraid. The fear felt like desire. Suddenly I wanted to go back and be in all the places I'd ever been. Every street I'd walked down, every room I'd sat down in. I wanted to see it all again. I tried to remember my life, flipping through Polaroids in my mind. It was so pretty there. It was interesting. But I knew that even if I could go back, if such a thing were possible with exactitude in life or in dreams, there was really no point. And then I felt desperately lonely. So I stuck my arm out and I grasped onto someone. Maybe it was Ping-Ji, maybe it was a wakefulness outside of myself, and that other hand steadied me somehow as I fell past whole galaxies, mercurial waves of light strobing through my body, blinding me over and over, my brain throbbing from the pleasure, my eyes leaking as though each teardrop shed a vision of my past. I felt the wetness trickle down my neck. I was crying. I knew that. I could hear myself gasp and whimper. I focused on the sound, and then the universe narrowed into a fine line, and that felt better because there was a clearer trajectory, so I traveled more peacefully through outer space, listening to the rhythm of my respiration. Each breath an echo of the breath before, softer and softer until I was far enough away that there was no sound, there was no movement. There was no need for reassurance or directionality, because I was nowhere, doing nothing. I was nothing. I was gone. On June 1st, 2001, I came to in a cross-legged, seated position on the living room floor. Sunlight was needling through the blinds, illuminating crisscrossed plains of yellow dust that blurred and waned as I squinted. I heard a bird chirp. I was alive. So that is the whole moment of the culmination of her entire plan. Somehow it has actually worked. And I did kind of like this idea that she called up that performance artist and used him to help her through this, final few months of really, really sleeping, and how he benefited from that. God, he was awful with his really grotesque exhibits. Did not care for that, but it made sense that that character ended up playing a bigger role in the end of the book. So we see her interact with Riva maybe one more time, and now that she's had this rebirth, this awakening, she's a lot kinder to Riva in her thoughts. She thinks, I didn't want her to leave. The white glare off the overhead light gleamed across her collarbones. She was beautiful, with all her nerves and all her complicated, circuitous feelings and contradictions and fears. This would be the last time I'd see her in person. It makes me wonder, at what point is she telling this from? Like, how far in the future is she telling this story from? Which is not something I used to think about very much. I didn't really care about that. And then when I went to school for writing, they were always talking about what point is your narrator telling this story from? Where is the narrator in their life now, looking back, telling it? And yeah, so now I kind of think about that. Not that I think it really matters that much, but it can be interesting. So, there's this interesting bit right at the very end. There was kindness. Pain is not the only touchstone for growth, I said to myself. My sleep had worked. I was soft and calm and felt things. This was good. This was my life now. I could survive without the house. I like how she says, pain is not the only touchstone for growth. So after this year of absolutely brutalizing her body, she realizes, oh, you don't have to do all that to yourself to grow. That kindness toward yourself and others actually is a really great way to grow and to heal. So then you have the ending, which you see coming for a while, because the whole time you're like, why is this set exactly when it is? Why is this in the year 2000? Why do we keep mentioning the Twin Towers? Like, I felt it was gonna have a climax there, and sure enough, that is how Riva dies. And then I just liked the way that she ended this book, was seeing the woman leap from the 78th floor of the North Tower. She says, I am overcome by awe, not because she looks like Riva and I think it's her, almost exactly her, and not because Riva and I had been friends, or because I'll never see her again, but because she is beautiful. There she is, a human being diving into the unknown, and she is wide awake. I mean, it's so darkly, deeply tragic and upsetting, that ending and the entire book. The ending makes sense to end such a very depressing book. And I'm just left not really knowing how I feel, other than I wouldn't read it again. And there are definitely depressing books like The Bell Jar that I would read over and over again. So I thought that was interesting that this one didn't resonate with me in the way that that did. And I would like to know if you've read both. Like, did you think about Bell Jar while you were reading this? And how would you compare that experience? And if you've read any other books by this author, what did you think? Because I'm kind of intrigued. I know she has a book of short stories, and I was thinking about checking that out. Now I'm not super sure because I'm not really sure if the writing is for me. But I see why this made such a splash, and let me know your thoughts about it. And I think that is all we're going to talk about. So thank you for watching, and until next time, happy reading.